Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome back to the modules for the Rooted in Healing curriculum on intergenerational trauma. I'm very grateful that you're here. I'm very grateful that you're back. If you haven't heard the previous episodes or modules in this particular series, I do recommend that you do that. I want to just take a moment and just kind of speak to you all directly before I continue with today's content on grounding. Is that this series is a very meaningful project to me. It's in so many ways really the reason why I went to grad school and got my PhD and, focused on trauma and culture, because this exact topic is something that I feel very strongly about because it's something that I witness pretty constantly in our community, and I see the detrimental effects that intergenerational trauma has on people. And it certainly isn't the only thing that people are Muslims, our community, just people generally are dealing with, but it is a very large piece of our experience that I think we only really have surface level language around. And I worry that because there's not too much kind of language and understanding of really the depth of impact of how trauma can move through generations and how we're so deeply impacted by these systems of oppression around us, that I worry that we're going to lose the potential value of really paying attention to this domain of our life. So I say this all to say that I take this topic very seriously and I put a lot of work into building this curriculum. But one thing that I actually didn't even realize for myself, which is what makes this particular episode even more powerful, even more important to really, really, contextualize for you all, is that I didn't realize how recording these episodes was going to affect me. And what does it mean for me to be talking about these ideas and these topics? Because I am also a member of the Muslim community. I am also someone who, is working through my own trauma. And I don't believe that it's the case that, a completely healed person needs to be the one to heal another, because I think we're all on this journey and we're all, trying to support one another in all the ways that we can. I happen to have a degree in this topic. I happen to have studied it for a long time and worked with people directly. And so I feel very excited and very honored to be able to share with you all everything that I'm sharing in this series. So I actually recorded the previous episode, I think almost a week ago, and my original plan was to record these back to back, but the reality is I'm having a hard time doing that because I've found that I actually need a little bit of time between each of these episodes to just sit and process myself. And I say this as somebody who's been interacting with this content for a long time, and so I really want to encourage you to also take your time with this content. The reason why I'm making it publicly accessible on my podcast is because I want people to be able to have a relationship with this content and, be able to come back to it, bookmark it, listen to it later. This is not easy work, and there is parts of this series that I guarantee that if you are somebody who has experienced intergenerational trauma or any type of trauma, to be honest, you'll probably dissociate while listening to some of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in this series as well. But you're probably going to start to just not just have a hard time paying attention, and so that's okay. I really want to say it's okay. Take what you can from this entire series. And just remember, what's kind of most important is just being able to take away at least one thing and really prioritizing the rights that your body has on you, your mind has on you, the people around you have on you, and of course, the responsibilities you have between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to go ahead and get started then with this particular topic on grounding. And it's important for us to be able to do this now before we move forward, because I do also want to kind of come back to some of these skills. And these are kind of the skills in the toolbox that I think most people, everyone should have. And actually, as you'll hear as we go through the episode, a lot of the skills here in this kind of, in this particular toolbox of coping, of grounding, is really actually already embedded within our spiritual tradition within Islam. So I look forward to kind of bringing it to us, kind of bringing it all together. So here's the truth, is that if you cannot find a moment to pause, then things need to drastically kind of shift in your life. And this is such a difficult thing to say because I am very well aware of the impact of capitalism and classism and etc. on the lives of people. But this is again where our Islamic tradition comes in and tells us that no matter who you are, if you meet certain criteria actually, then you are required to pause in your day to pray. And for most people, that's praying 5 times a day. So that's at least 5 different moments of time, of pause. Salah in our tradition has so many different benefits, ones that we won't ever really truly understand, I believe, the benefits of Salah, of prayer, of the 5 daily prayers. But what we can glean from the structure and the routine of Salah is that there is we can almost say a requirement towards our spirituality to be able to pause. To be able to pause and just reflect and reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It really is very difficult to be able to find longer moments of pause. Everybody's life is different. And especially amidst all of this political violence and this trauma that we're all experiencing. And so instead of always seeking an experience of like waiting to feel safe, waiting until everything calms down before you take care of yourself, before you prioritize your own well-being, before you start really looking at your life and paying attention to the patterns in your behavior and your thought patterns that you actually want to shift because they don't really align with your values. Instead of just waiting for that experience of safety all the time where everything is going to calm down, I instead want us all to be considering the ways that we can and we should be creating pockets of safety, pockets of pause for ourselves throughout the day and throughout our week. So in this module, we're going to talk about how to create these pockets of safety, pockets of pause in the present moment, in the here and now. There's so much that I want to say about kind of the field of psychology and how long it took for the field of psychology to get to a place to appreciate, the present moment, to appreciate mindfulness, to appreciate reflection, because it is something that many traditions for so long have already established as an important part of our well-being. But it is the case that in the field of psychology, this really is only a recent popularized movement. But this experience of coming back to the here and now, to the present moment, can feel foreign to some people. And so I want to take a second to really talk about that and talk about why it's important. So healing trauma, it's not just about understanding what happened to you. We live in such a strong intellectual age where everybody wants to understand, and sometimes I will even admit, sometimes in my sessions with my clients, I hear them say, "But I get that. I already understand that," and I have to sometimes pause them to say that you might understand it intellectually, but does your body understand it? And so, healing trauma, it's not just about understanding what happened to you. It's about helping your body and your heart and your nervous system to feel that right now, in this moment, you are okay. That right now, in this moment, whoever you are, as you're listening to me, now I don't know the circumstance that you're actually in right now. Inshallah, everybody is safe. But when you are in a moment of safe, right, you're sitting in your car, you're walking somewhere, really being able to appreciate the moment, what is happening right now, in this moment, not what happened before, the stories that we have and the projections that we have about the past and that we have about the future, but instead right now in this moment. And so that's what we're going to talk about is grounding. Grounding is kind of coming back to the present moment. And so we're going to talk about why it matters and how we can practice it in a way that honors your nervous system and also your faith. So grounding is the process of bringing yourself back into the present moment, especially when you feel overwhelmed or triggered or emotionally flooded, when you feel like there's just so many emotions going through you. It helps calm your nervous system and it reestablishes a sense of safety, at least in your body and in your mind. And when we experience trauma, especially chronic or intergenerational trauma, and we talked about this in the previous module, our nervous system, it loses the ability to return to calm, to come back to homeostasis. And so instead we get stuck in states of fight or flight, in states of freeze or shut down. And here's the thing, is that you can't access healing or connection to your body or, insight into your unconscious when you're in all the time in that survival mode. And so grounding is a way to interrupt that process so we can weave into your experiences moments of clarity, moments of integration, moments of connection that will help you along this larger journey of healing, this larger journey of kind of restructuring your life sometimes to be able to get to a system that promotes your well-being and the well-being of the people around you. And so grounding is like giving your body the message hey, right now in this moment, you are not in danger. You can breathe. You are allowed to rest. And we see this wisdom actually reflected also in our prophetic tradition where the Prophet ﷺ, when he was distressed, he would tell Bilal to give the adhan. And he would tell him to give us rest through it. And so this grounding experience, it doesn't have to be a complex, incredibly effortful experience. I wonder what are the ways or what are the sounds or what are the things that you actually are already doing to bring yourself back to the present moment, to calm your body down, to remember that, hey, actually, I don't need to be that upset about what just happened. I can take a second to look in. And so it's going to be important then to be able, the first step here is to recognize when you are dysregulated. So recall last time we talked about the nervous system, when it becomes activated, there's all of these things that happen, all the symptoms that we talked about, right? Restlessness, you can't think straight. Sometimes people get really angry, people get really upset, emotions are heightened, or sometimes emotions are numbed out as well. But it can look different, that dysregulation, that distress signal that comes out of you. So part of the initial steps here is to be able to take a second to pay attention to what happens to you when you are stressed out. Are you the type to shut down? Are you the type to get angry? Are you the type to want to tell everybody about the thing when you're stressed out? Are you the type to really withdraw and isolate yourself? Do you have racing thoughts? Do you have trouble focusing and making decisions? Do you feel like you're just too much? You're too much for the world. You're too much for the people around you. It's okay if any or all of these things sound familiar. It just means that your nervous system is still trying to protect you the way that it always has. But what it also means is that we need to build new pathways to safety. And so it's important to ask yourself, when I get overwhelmed, what helps me feel more present? What helps me pause? So let's talk about some of the practical tools, the practical grounding things that you can actually do to implement what I'm talking about when I say pause. Now, the first kind of easiest thing, the easiest way into grounding is being able to use your 5 senses. So alhamdulillah, for most of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us most of our senses. We have the ability to touch things, right? So if you literally if you just compress your hands and just push your fingers onto your palm, just feel that sensation on your hand for a second. So what we're doing right now is we're grounding through touch and we're focusing on the sensation on our hands. And so this is a grounding technique that we're doing right now. Sensation is sometimes, I find for myself, the easiest one to use because it's my actual body is already interacting with the world. So if you're already holding something, just take a second to move your mind to think about what that object feels like. If you're wearing shoes or socks, if you move your toes around and move your ankles around, you'll start to feel the shoe or the sock or whatever is on your feet that you didn't really notice before, but now you can. If you're sitting on a chair, think about your body leaning on the couch, on the chair, on whatever it is that you're touching. Putting our consciousness into this physical grounding, putting our mind to think about it, that what we're doing is we're coming back to the present moment. Because in the present moment, you're holding this pen. In the present moment, you're sitting there on the couch. You are here in this present moment. So this next part that I want to share is something that I think about very often, but I really want to give a disclaimer, and I want to give this disclaimer quite often, is that I am not an Islamic scholar. I have a PhD. People call me Dr. Hanan Hashem. But I am not an Islamic scholar. I did not formally study Islamic studies outside of, traditional like Islamic school and retreats and programs and things like that. I just happen to wear hijab and I'm Muslim, but I am a scholar in psychology. So the next piece that I'm going to say has much more to do with kind of my thinking in the overlap between how we understand qadr and the importance that I'm putting here, and really this whole, the whole field puts into the present moment. Because when we think about our lives and we think about all of the things that we have gone through in the past, as Muslims, we have a conviction, we have a belief that everything that has already happened has already been written for us. Now, there's a lot of nuances to the ideas of fate and predeterminism and determinism as well, but I want to, for the sake of today, just kind of tie in how the present moment becomes incredibly important here. Because when we talk about trauma, when we talk about all of these like horrific stuff, areas and, times of suffering, experiences of suffering that people are having all over the world, everywhere, right next to us in our own homes. We are oftentimes going through suffering ourselves. Is that the suffering that has already happened was something that was already written for you because it already happened. And so the present moment, it gives us an opportunity to just reflect on and appreciate what has already been offered to us in this life, the tests that have been offered to us, and how we want to change our trajectory or affect our trajectory into the future. So in the present moment is an opportunity to reflect and an opportunity to interrogate and an opportunity to pause so that the future in which we do have some level of free choice, we make choices that align with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants for us. And ultimately it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, but in that process, what aligns with our own values and what is good for us. And so in the present moment, there is wisdom for us to pause and for us to reflect and for us to change course if that's what needs to happen for the future. And so taking the time to do this physical grounding, right, where we're literally paying attention to what our body is doing right now in this moment, can bring us back to that place where our entire nervous system calms down. That activity that I just made you all do, where you're, just kind of paying attention to what's on your feet or in your hands or what you're sitting on, that regulated your nervous system. That brought your heart rate down. It, reshuffled the blood flow back to your frontal. Like it really, there are so many parts that really kind of, so many parts of your body and your system that calm down. And I only described sensation, like the physical sense, right? How things that you can feel in texture. Because I do recommend for folks to actually pay attention to the textures that you do have, that you already do enjoy, that already exist in your life, and try to kind of be more intentional about where you have texture in your home and in your clothes and, in your car, etc. We haven't even gotten to, but I'll let you use your imagination around the things that you can do with sight. So looking around, looking for particular colors, taking a second to say, how much blue can I find around me? So in my case, like my pencil pouch here is blue and the top of the Vaseline bottle is blue and I have a little cushion here that's blue. And so just kind of paying attention to the blue, it does something very similar. You can do the same with sounds. Taking like a second to just hear what's around you. All the little noises. You can do it with taste. You can do it with smells. I think there's a lot of wisdom in Muslims smelling good because I think it regulates your nervous system. So being careful about how you smell and how your house smells, and just being very mindful of that. You know, the power of just having some plants in your house or some flowers, the power of going outside. I think they call it nature bathing when people go like on a hike or they go into the forest. And so I want you to imagine all of the senses that are being impacted when you go outside, you know, to a park, or you go to a forest, or you go for a hike. All of your senses are being activated, and they're all consuming God-made materials, right? Like trees, the sky, the smells, the insect, like you're listening to the insects. These are all created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's the physical grounding. So I spent a lot of time there on the physical grounding to really give you like a sense of the kind of diversity of tools that you have here. This is oftentimes why people also really like exercising and working out, because you're really working with your physical body and you're having a connection, a direct connection, you know, mind-body connection that can actually really help a lot of folks. The second, practical category of tools is breath work. Being able to breathe has an incredible impact on your mind, on your present moment. And so in the previous module, we talked about the nervous system and how there's kind of this kind of domino effect that happens in your body when your mind or your body believes that you're in actual danger, that you're no longer safe. And what breathing does is it actually reverses that system. So what I like to think of, I kind of like to imagine when I'm, slow breathing. So the most basic kind of breath work that you can do is just a deep breath in with your nose, all the way in, and breathing it out with your mouth, blowing it out with your mouth. So right now, let's do that a few times. Let's do it 3 times. Breathe in, and I actually want you to hold it at the top, and then you're going to blow it out. So we're going to breathe in, pause, and we're going to blow it out. Do that 2 more times. Breathe in. Alhamdulillah. So that being able to do that, just to take a moment to breathe, I highly, highly recommend doing that right before you start salah, right before you start an important conversation, right before you start a meeting, right before you do anything where you know you need a little bit more concentration and a little bit more focus and a little bit more determinism, feel a little bit more determined, is just to do that breath work. And it really kind of centers you in. There's actually so much work that's being done in the scientific world also about like how the breath affects our spiritual state. That's a whole other like process. It's a whole other like topic that I'm not going to go into here, but there are ways that people can induce psychotic episodes or even hallucinate by breathing in particular ways. So the breath is actually the connection that the breath has with the mind and the body is actually quite powerful. And I look forward to the ways that we continue to study that. So we talked about physical grounding. We talked about breath work. Then there is mental grounding, which I also will kind of combine with one of my favorite ways of grounding, which is dhikr. And so we have so many dhikrs and these are like short prayers that we have in Islam. And I don't want to, what I really don't want to do here is spend too much time convincing you, because I do think that the evidence is quite clear around, the impact of like mantras or the impact of like repeating certain words over and over again. But to me, all of that scientific evidence, and I say this as somebody with a PhD who conducts scientific research on the regular, the scientific evidence is really secondary to what Islam has already told us is beneficial to us. And so for me, that scientific evidence really is like, oh, sweet. Okay, here's the science behind it. But we already knew, those of us that follow the Islamic tradition and bear testimony to La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, that embedded within the faith is healing. And so what I suggest for folks to do is to think about, or to really do research, even if you're not familiar, with all of the different dhikrs, all the different little prayers that we have in our faith, and really think about which ones you just enjoy. You enjoy, whether it's for the meaning, whether you enjoy it for the way that it sounds. You'll find so many of these prayers can be quite poetic, both in meaning and in like the way that it sounds. So really kind of doing a little bit of research and having a personal relationship with some of these dhikrs. What are they really about? Dr. Sheikh Umar Sulaiman actually has a whole series on different adhkar, and he goes through each of the ones that are very common in our faith tradition, and really describes where it comes from and the imagery behind it and the lessons behind it. So I really highly recommend watching those series and really developing a relationship with a dhikr that you can just say whenever you're stressed out. What is the small prayer that you enjoy saying that is the same words uttered by the Prophet and by the Sahaba? What are the same words, right? Hasbi Allahu wa ni'mal wakeel. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Etc. And so I want you to really kind of think. There's so many of them. I'm like, my mind right now is kind of racing through lots of different ones. I do recommend that you look some up and really start just practicing saying adhkar. There's right now, and it's, I guess like August 2025, there's this lady on my Instagram reels that keeps showing up, and she has like one of those little clickers where she's just doing adhkar, and she just shows us like how much adhkar she's done in a particular day. I love that so much. I think it's such a powerful way to spend your mental energy, your mental capacity, your mental cognitive load, is by reciting adhkar to the best of your ability. And know that even if you did it for, just on your walk from the front of your house to your car, just that short walk where you spent some time just doing some adhkar can really go a long way for you. And so a reminder that these tools, the physical grounding, the breath work, the dhikr, and then I also want to reiterate pausing, slowing down, sitting in sujood for longer than usual, making wudu a little bit more slowly, brushing your teeth, and remembering that like the reason why you're brushing your teeth and setting your intention around that can really help, change the trajectory of your day. It's such a tricky thing to talk about, pausing, right? And I mentioned before, for the reasons of capitalism and classism and how we really are truly being, the structure created around us is really one that is forcing us to just be working as often as we can, to be making as much money and being as productive as we can. And so in addition to the systems that are really forcing our bodies to have a hard time to pause, we're also dealing with systems that have cognitively made it impossible for us to pause. Cognitively impossible for us to pause, where our minds are constantly racing. Right? How often do we say, I'll think about that later, and then the later time that we're going to be thinking about that thing is actually during Salah. And so we even have to really compartmentalize when we can think about things, because we have become so busy. And in spite of all of that, the pause that we're talking about here is something already embedded in our faith as an important part of our ritual spiritual practice. And so as hard as it is, I prefer that the priority in our lives is at least Salah. And in Salah is where you can practice all of these grounding skills. You can breathe. You can focus on where your hands are and how your body is moving during Salah. You can repeat the adhkar that come in Salah. Right? Slowly recite the Quran, etc. Okay, So I want to say something that's really important, especially for those of us who are really just kind of like used to pushing through the pain in our lives. And sometimes I find folks who are like willing to push through the pain to like desperately seek like healing and safety. And what I want to say is that you don't have to heal everything at once. You don't have to understand every single thing that has happened to you in your life in order to feel like you can move forward. You don't have to we don't have to rehash everything, all of the details. You don't have to have somebody see every single part of who you are in order for you to be doing the healing work. Because it's not about intensity and it's not about speed. And actually, trying to do too much, too fast, can actually re-traumatize you or just kind of get you stuck. Because healing, it's not about intensity. Instead, I want you to think about healing as integration. You come across a memory, a feeling, a realization about your family, perhaps, that feels really too big. And that's okay. You don't have to do anything with that. You can pause. You can take a step back. You can ground yourself. You can remember that you are safe now. And this is what pacing looks like. Is just being able to do 10 seconds of a pause, 5 seconds of a pause instead of 5 minutes. Just breathing, doing one deep breath as soon as you get into your car. Coming back to a hard topic that you actually do need to talk to somebody about, but coming back to it when you have a little bit more internal capacity to hold the difficulty and the stress that might come from that conversation. This curriculum, this information, healing, it's not a race. You're not behind. There's nowhere to get to. I want to come back to the point I made earlier about how everything that has already happened to you has already been written for you. And so you're not behind. Right now, in the present moment, this is the most important moment. Because this is where you make decisions about how you want to respond differently to the past and how you want to show up for yourself moving forward. There's nowhere to get to. We're just here, just one moment of peace at a time. Okay, so this brings us towards the end of this particular module. And so I just want to review a couple of things with you all. We talked about building your grounding toolkit, trying out different grounding exercises, whether it's like using the physical touch, your eyesight, different senses, noting which one feels most helpful. We have a hadith from the Prophet telling someone that when they're upset, they should sit down. And if they're still upset, if they're still angry, to lay down. Consider all the pausing that's being asked of this person. We also talked about some breath work, setting just aside just like a minute, right? And you don't even need to set aside a minute. Honestly, you can just do it on your way to something when you're driving in your car or commuting to work, or the moment you close a Zoom meeting that you're in, just taking 1 second to pause, or right before you enter a Zoom meeting. We also talked about using some faith-based practices. Consider your favorite ayah, specific dua, a specific dhikr. Now, I want to end this episode by reminding you that healing doesn't begin in the mind. A lot of healing, especially as we're talking about this, especially as we're talking about intergenerational trauma, a lot of this healing actually starts in the body and using the body as a tool to understand your stress, to understand how you respond to stress, to understand how you soothe. What are the things that you need to keep you calm after feeling stressed? How do you self-soothe? What are the things that you soothe with? What are the things that are healthy to soothe with? And what are the things that are not? And so when you choose to ground yourself, when we're doing these grounding exercises, you're talking to your nervous system. That same nervous system that's been activated because of the trauma that you've gone through, that nervous system is physically in your body. Your body is physically Keeping the Score. Many of you may be familiar with that book. How the body keeps the score. Your body is the vessel that has carried you through all of your experiences. And so it's important to honor it, and it's important to pay attention to it. And as you're doing these grounding exercises, you're essentially telling your nervous system, we are not at war anymore. We are safe enough to feel. We are safe enough to pause. You are beautiful. You are rebuilding yourself one breath at a time, one practice at a time. In the next module, we're going to dive into how trauma moves across families and generations, and how the patterns that we live with now may actually have deeper roots than we realized. And if you want to walk this journey in real time with other people and really have a place to process how intergenerational trauma has affected your ability to show up with other people, has affected your interpersonal relationships, don't forget about that 7-week process group that we are running. It is open. Signups are open. It should be open for the fall season. And inshallah, I hope to offer it in the future as well. And so until then, may Allah make your inner world a place of safety and a place that encourages pause. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.